The low hum of quantum encryption filters barely masked the tension in the cramped communications hub. Dr. Maya Rodriguez leaned forward, her dark eyes reflecting the cascade of holographic data streams that danced around her workspace. Something was wrong. Profoundly, fundamentally wrong. Her fingers, calloused from years of stenopolitical research, moved with precision across the quantum interface. Each touch sent ripples of algorithmic probes through layers of supposedly impenetrable Galactic Council communications networks. Maya wasn't just a researcher. She was a digital huntress. And tonight, she was tracking something big. The breakthrough came at 3:47 Greenwich Mean Time. A microscopic fracture in the Council's quantum encryption, barely a whisper of an anomaly. But to Maya, it was like a beacon. Most would have missed it. Most weren't her. With a series of mirror-linked keystrokes, she began to unpeel the layers of encrypted data. The first fragments were innocuous. Diplomatic communiques, standard bureaucratic nonsense. But then, buried deep within a subroutine that most analysts would have dismissed as administrative white noise, she found it. The document was clinical in its brutality. Resolution 7 Gamma 9. Comprehensive Mitigation Protocol for Emerging Species. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Mitigation was council speak for controlled extinction. The document outlined a comprehensive plan to systematically restrict human expansion, economic development, and technological growth. But it went further, much further. Genetic restrictions that would slowly sterilize human populations. Economic sanctions designed to crush any hope of interstellar development. Diplomatic isolation that would render humanity a forgotten footnote in galactic history. The scale of the betrayal was breathtaking. Behind her, the secure facility hummed with the unconscious energy of hundreds of researchers and analysts. None of them knew what she had just discovered. None of them understood the magnitude of the threat hanging over their species. A notification pinged, her personal quantum communication implant. It was a message from Chen Wei, her old MIT research partner, now working deep within the United Nations Extraterrestrial Cooperation Bureau. Maya. Secure channel. Now. She initiated the quantum encrypted connection, her hands slightly trembling. Chen's holographic projection flickered to life. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You've seen it," he said. It wasn't a question. Maya nodded. Resolution 7 Gamma 9. They're not just trying to slow us down. They're planning to suffocate humanity. Chen's projection showed the first genuine emotion she'd seen from him in years. Fear, mixed with a cold, calculating rage. We have approximately 72 hours before the resolution becomes binding. After that, the mechanisms of our destruction are already in motion. The implications were staggering. The Galactic Council, a body that had overseen interstellar relations for millennia, had decided that humanity was a threat, not because of what they had done, but because of what they might become. Maya understood then that this was more than a political maneuver. This was an attempted extinction. "We're not going to let this happen," she said, her voice a blade of pure determination. Chen's hologram flickered, a ghost of a smile crossing his worn features. "No, we're absolutely not." In that moment, the quiet research hub became the epicenter of humanity's most important battle, a fight not just for survival, but for the right to determine its own destiny among the stars. The global transformation began in whispers, then erupted like a wildfire. Within hours of Maya's discovery, a network of hackers, scientists, military strategists, and political dissidents converged through quantum-encrypted channels that made traditional communication networks look like children's walkie-talkies. The United Nations Emergency Extraterrestrial Response Committee, a body that had existed more as a diplomatic formality, suddenly became humanity's war room. Colonel Marcus Reyes stood before a holographic display that covered an entire wall of the underground command center. Projected star charts, economic models, and technological schematics danced around him like living entities. His team wasn't just preparing a defense. They were redesigning the very concept of human potential. "We're not just fighting a war," Reyes announced to the assembled team. We're fighting our right to exist. Dr. Elena Kovic, a quantum systems engineer who looked like she'd been awake for days, stepped forward. Her latest prototype, a neural-linked adaptive computing system, represented a quantum leap beyond anything the Galactic Council had ever encountered. Traditional computing is linear, she explained, her fingers dancing across a holographic interface. What we're developing isn't just a computer. It's a living, thinking system that can predict and counter threats before they even manifest. Across the world, every sector of human society began to shift. Universities converted research labs into development centers. Tech companies suspended commercial projects to focus on defensive technologies. Even social media platforms transformed into recruitment and information-sharing networks. In Silicon Valley, a group of entrepreneurs who'd previously competed now worked side by side, their rivalry replaced by a unified purpose. In Tokyo, a team of genetic engineers began exploring radical modifications that could enhance human adaptability. Moscow's top cybersecurity experts collaborated with hackers they would have arrested months ago. The transformation wasn't just technological, it was cultural. Chen Wei, working from a secure facility in New York, orchestrated a global economic counteroffensive. Financial systems were being rewired, cryptocurrency algorithms redesigned to create economic firewalls that could withstand any external pressure. They want to strangle us economically, Chen muttered to himself. We'll turn our entire economic structure into a weapon. Military bases around the world began a silent mobilization, not the traditional troop movements of past conflicts, but a more insidious preparation. Every satellite, every communication network, every piece of infrastructure was being hardened, modified, prepared. In Australia, a team of environmental engineers began developing terraforming technologies that could transform inhospitable environments, a direct response to potential planetary restrictions. In Brazil, agricultural scientists worked on crop modifications that could survive in extreme conditions. The Galactic Council's resolution was meant to clip humanity's wings. Instead, it had given them rocket fuel. Maya Rodriguez continued her digital reconnaissance, now supported by a global network of the most brilliant minds humanity could assemble. Each discovered fragment of the Council's plan was immediately dissected, analyzed, and transformed into a potential point of vulnerability. They think they know us, Maya said to Colonel Reyes during a secure briefing. They think they understand human potential. They have no idea what's coming. Reyes allowed himself a rare smile. No, he responded, they absolutely do not. The gathering storm was no longer just a metaphor. Humanity was becoming something new, a species pushed to the absolute limits of its potential, transformed by the very threat designed to contain it. The research facility buried beneath the Atacama Desert looked like nothing more than a series of unremarkable prefabricated structures. But 3 kilometers underground, humanity was rewriting the fundamental laws of science. Dr. Elena Kovic stood before a quantum computing array that pulsed with an almost living energy. Surrounding her, a team of researchers from 32 different countries worked with a single burning purpose. This wasn't just research anymore. This was humanity's technological revenge. The breakthrough isn't in processing power, Helena explained to Colonel Reyes during his weekly status briefing. It's in adaptive intelligence. We're creating systems that don't just compute. They anticipate, they learn, they evolve faster than any threat can respond. The quantum array before her was unlike anything in human or alien history. Each node was a living neural network, capable of processing complex scenarios at speeds that made traditional supercomputers look like abacuses. More importantly, it could predict potential threats before they fully materialized. Across the facility, other teams worked on equally revolutionary projects. In one lab, a group of genetic engineers led by Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura was exploring human biological enhancement that went far beyond traditional genetic modification. They weren't just improving human capabilities, they were fundamentally reimagining what it meant to be human. The Galactic Council sees us as a static species, Nakamura muttered, reviewing holographic genetic sequences. They have no idea how quickly we can adapt. The biological modifications weren't just about physical enhancement. They were developing genetic adaptations that could help humans survive in extreme environments, resist unknown biological threats, and push the boundaries of human potential. In another section of the facility, a team of materials scientists had achieved something that would have been considered impossible just months ago. They were developing adaptive nanomaterials that could change their molecular structure in real time, responding to environmental threats with near instantaneous precision. Chen Wei arrived from New York, bringing with him the latest economic intelligence. The global economic counteroffensive was in full swing. Cryptocurrency algorithms had been completely redesigned, creating economic networks that could withstand any external pressure. Financial systems were being transformed into adaptive networks that could route around potential blockades. "They want to strangle our economy," Chen explained to Elena. "So we're making our entire economic structure a moving target." The most surprising developments weren't coming from government or corporate labs. A global network of hackers, scientists, and researchers was collaborating in ways that defied traditional scientific methodology. Open-source research platforms were solving complex problems in hours that would have taken years under traditional research models. Maya Rodriguez oversaw much of this coordination, her quantum communication systems creating a near-instantaneous global research network. Information, ideas, and breakthrough concepts were shared and developed at a speed that would have been unimaginable just months before. During one briefing, Colonel Rice looked at the accumulated research and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: true hope. "They thought they could contain us," he said to Elena, watching the quantum array pulse with potential. "Instead, they've unleashed something they can't possibly understand." The facility hummed with potential, with the sound of a species pushed to its absolute limit, and finding itself stronger than anyone could have imagined. Outside, the Atacama Desert remained unchanged. But 3 kilometers below the surface, humanity was becoming something entirely new. A species transformed by threat, refined by challenge, and prepared to show the Galactic Council the true meaning of human potential. The first strike began not with a thunderous explosion, but with a whisper of digital silence. At exactly 4:17 Universal Galactic Time, every communication network controlled by the Galactic Council simply stopped. It wasn't a traditional cyber attack. It was something far more sophisticated, a complete neural deconstruction of their quantum communication infrastructure. Colonel Marcus Reyes watched from the underground command center as holographic displays showed the systematic dismantling of alien communication networks. Each system didn't crash. It unraveled with a precision that suggested something beyond mere hacking. "It's like watching a surgeon," Maya Rodriguez muttered, her fingers dancing across quantum interfaces. "We're not destroying their systems. We're taking them apart, piece by molecular piece." The attack was multilayered. While digital systems collapsed, a series of precisely coordinated economic maneuvers began to destabilize the Council's financial networks. Cryptocurrencies developed by Chen Wei's team acted like intelligent viruses, routing through economic channels, identifying vulnerabilities, and systematically neutralizing them. In orbit, a new generation of stealth satellites, developed using technologies that made current cloaking systems look like child's play, began their silent reconnaissance. These weren't just observation platforms. They were adaptive weapons systems that could reconfigure themselves faster than any defensive algorithm could predict. Dr. Elena Kovac's quantum computing breakthrough manifested in ways nobody had anticipated. The satellites weren't just collecting information. They were actively predicting and neutralizing potential defensive responses before they could even be conceived. On Earth, military installations that had looked like standard defense networks transformed. Automated systems powered by neural-linked AI began mobilizing with a fluidity that defied traditional military doctrine. Entire defense strategies were being rewritten in microseconds, adapting to potential scenarios faster than any human commander could process. The first physical manifestation of the attack came unexpectedly. Rather than a massive military strike, it was a series of precisely targeted interventions. Communication relays for the Galactic Council's Outer Rim monitoring stations simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but systematically deconstructed at a molecular level. "We're not just attacking," Chen Wei explained during a secure briefing. "We're demonstrating that we can neutralize their systems at will." The psychological warfare was perhaps the most devastating component. Every system the Galactic Council relied on, communication, economic, strategic, was being systematically revealed as fundamentally vulnerable. It wasn't just an attack. It was a comprehensive demonstration of human capabilities. In the Atacama Desert Research Facility, Dr. Nakamura's team watched as their biological modification protocols began their first real-world test. Adaptive nanobots designed to survive in multiple environmental conditions were deployed through carefully selected channels, their capabilities far beyond anything the Galactic Council had anticipated. Colonel Reyes understood the true nature of their strategy. This wasn't about destruction. It was about demonstration. "We're showing them exactly what happens when you try to cage a species that refuses to be contained," he said, watching the holographic displays show the systematic deconstruction of alien infrastructure. Maya Rodriguez caught his eye and allowed herself a rare smile. "They thought they knew humanity," she said. "They were wrong." As the first phase of the attack concluded, the Galactic Council found itself facing a fundamental truth. The species they had sought to marginalize had just shown them that containment was nothing more than a failed strategy. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. They were rewriting the entire rulebook of interstellar conflict. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in absolute panic. The vast crystalline chamber on the neutral planet of Zurax typically radiated an aura of timeless authority. Today, it pulsed with raw, unfiltered terror. Representatives from dozens of advanced civilizations stared in collective disbelief at the holographic reports streaming before them. Cal Thury, the Viridian archdiplomat, spoke first. His translucent form flickered with barely contained anxiety. "Humanity has destroyed more of our infrastructure in 72 hours than any emerging species has accomplished in 10,000 years of galactic history." The reports were clinical in their brutality. Entire communication networks, systems that had remained stable for millennia, had been systematically deconstructed. Economic channels that had been considered impenetrable were now exposed as fundamentally vulnerable. Worse, every attempt to counteract human strategies seemed to trigger even more devastating responses. "They're not just fighting," whispered Tizara, the Silicon Consciousness representative. "They're learning, adapting, in real time." Colonel Marcus Reyes watched the Council's panic through a quantum-encrypted surveillance network developed by Maya Rodriguez. The psychological warfare was working perfectly. Humanity wasn't just demonstrating military capability, they were demonstrating an entirely new paradigm of conflict. Back on Earth, the transformation continued at an exponential rate. Universities had become research fortresses. Every major corporation had redirected its entire infrastructure toward a single goal: proving humanity's right to exist. Dr. Elena Kovac's quantum computing team had achieved something that defied traditional scientific understanding. Their adaptive AI systems weren't just processing information. They were predicting potential alien responses with such precision that it seemed almost like precognition. "We're not developing technology," Elena explained during a global briefing. "We're developing a collective intelligence that can outthink an entire galactic civilization." The biological modifications developed by Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura's team were showing extraordinary results. Human volunteers were demonstrating adaptive capabilities that blurred the line between technological enhancement and biological evolution. Immune systems that could rapidly reconfigure themselves. Neural networks that could process complex information faster than any known species. Chen Wei's economic warfare team had transformed the global financial system into a living, breathing entity. Cryptocurrency algorithms moved like intelligent organisms, routing around potential blockades, creating economic channels that were impossible to predict or control. In the Galactic Council chambers, the reality was becoming clear. Humanity wasn't just resisting. They were actively dismantling the established order. They turned our own systems against us. Caltheri muttered, his diplomatic composure crumbling. Every defensive mechanism we've developed is being used as a weapon. Maya Rodriguez, monitoring the Council's communication channels, allowed herself a moment of dark satisfaction. The psychological profile they had developed was working perfectly. The Council's hierarchical structure, which had dominated galactic politics for millennia, was fundamentally unable to comprehend humanity's approach. They're playing a different game, she told Colonel Reyes, and they don't even realize it yet. The first phase of humanity's response was complete. What began as a potential extinction protocol had transformed into something far more dangerous, a complete reimagining of what an emerging species could become. The Galactic Council had made a fatal mistake, and humanity was just getting started. The systematic dismantling of the Galactic Council's power structure was both an art and a science. Dr. Maya Rodriguez stood in the central command hub, her fingers dancing across quantum interfaces that looked more like living organisms than computer systems. Around her, a global network of specialists worked with a precision that defied traditional understanding of collaboration. We're not just fighting, she explained to Colonel Reyes during a secure briefing. We're performing interstellar surgery. The attack was multilayered and breathtakingly complex. Economic channels were being rerouted, communication networks deconstructed, and diplomatic relationships surgically severed. But the most devastating weapon was information itself. Chen Wei's economic warfare team had transformed global financial systems into something far beyond traditional cryptocurrency. These were living economic entities that could predict, adapt, and neutralize potential threats in microseconds. Entire alien economic sectors found themselves slowly strangled by networks they couldn't comprehend or combat. In orbit, a new generation of stealth satellites, developed using technologies that made current cloaking systems look primitive, began a campaign of surgical information warfare. They weren't just collecting data. They were actively destabilizing the Galactic Council's communication and intelligence infrastructure. Dr. Elena Kovac's quantum computing breakthrough manifested in ways that defied conventional scientific understanding. The satellites were actively predicting potential defensive responses, neutralizing them before they could even be conceived. The most surprising front of the conflict was diplomatic. Humanity began reaching out to species long subjugated by the Galactic Council. These were not traditional diplomatic missions, but precisely targeted information campaigns that exposed the Council's long-standing manipulation. We're giving voice to the voiceless, Maya explained. Every species that has been marginalized becomes a potential ally. On Earth, research facilities that had once competed were now working in perfect synchronization. The Atacama Desert Research Center had become the epicenter of a global transformation. Biological modifications, quantum computing, adaptive AI. Every breakthrough was shared instantaneously across a global network. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura's genetic modification team was achieving the impossible. Human volunteers were demonstrating adaptive capabilities that blurred the line between technological enhancement and biological evolution. Immune systems that could reconfigure themselves. Neural networks that processed complex information faster than any known species. Colonel Reyes understood the true nature of their strategy. This wasn't about destruction. It was about fundamental transformation. We're not just fighting, he told Maya, watching holographic displays show the systematic deconstruction of alien infrastructure. We're rewriting the entire rulebook of interstellar existence. The Galactic Council found itself facing a fundamental truth. The species they had sought to marginalize was systematically dismantling everything they believed about power, communication, and technological development. Alien diplomatic channels began to fragment. Economic systems that had remained stable for millennia suddenly found themselves vulnerable. Communication networks that were considered impenetrable were being systematically deconstructed. They thought they knew humanity, Maya said, a rare smile crossing her face. They were catastrophically wrong. As the sixth phase of their response concluded, humanity had done more than just resist. They had demonstrated that an emerging species could become something far more dangerous than any established civilization could imagine. The Galactic Council's attempt at control had become their ultimate vulnerability. The final confrontation was nothing like anyone had anticipated. Space itself seemed to bend around the massive fleet that humanity had assembled. These were not traditional spacecraft, but living technologies that defied every known principle of interstellar engineering. Each vessel was a hybrid of biological adaptation and quantum computing, capable of metamorphosing in real time to counter any potential threat. Colonel Marcus Reyes stood on the bridge of the flagship Prometheus, a command center that was more living organism than machine. Dr. Elena Kovic's quantum neural interface allowed him to perceive battle strategies with a clarity that bordered on precognition. Surrounding him, a crew of specialists from every corner of Earth worked with a synchronicity that seemed almost supernatural. "We're not just fighting a war," Reyes muttered, watching holographic battle projections dance around him. "We're rewriting the fundamental laws of conflict." The first wave of the assault was psychological. Before a single weapon fired, humanity unleashed a communication barrage that systematically dismantled the Galactic Council's political and military cohesion. Encrypted data packets carried revelations that exposed centuries of manipulations, subjugations, and calculated oppressions. Maya Rodriguez, coordinating from the Quantum Communication Hub on Earth, watched as decades of alien diplomatic constructs simply unraveled. Species long thought pacified began to recognize their own potential. The Galactic Council's carefully maintained hierarchy collapsed like a house of cards. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura's biological modification teams had prepared for this moment. The human soldiers were no longer purely human. They were adaptive organisms that could survive in vacuum, regenerate from near-fatal injuries, and process tactical information faster than any known species could comprehend. Chen Wei's economic warfare reached its culmination. The financial systems humanity had developed were now weapons themselves, intelligent networks that could predict and neutralize economic defenses before they could be activated. Entire alien economic sectors found themselves systematically dismantled. The physical battle, when it came, was almost anticlimactic. Alien defensive systems, designed over millennia of galactic dominance, found themselves facing an enemy that didn't follow any known rules of engagement. Human vessels didn't just move, they anticipated. They didn't just defend, they transformed. Each encounter was a living, breathing strategy that adapted faster than any defensive algorithm could process. They trained for wars fought 1,000 years ago, Alina said, monitoring the battle's quantum dynamics. "We're fighting a war that hasn't even been imagined yet." Entire alien fleet formations simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, deconstructed. Molecular systems turned against themselves. Communication networks became vectors of their own destruction. Defensive shields transformed into vulnerabilities. The Prometheus moved through the battlefield like a living thought, its capabilities so advanced that traditional concepts of weaponry seemed obsolete. It wasn't just a spacecraft, it was a statement. A declaration that humanity would no longer be defined by anyone else's expectations. As the final confrontation reached its zenith, it became clear that this was more than a battle. It was a fundamental transformation of what it meant to be an emerging species in a galaxy of established powers. Colonel Reyes watched the final projections and understood the true nature of their victory. "We're not conquering," he said quietly. "We're liberating." The Galactic Council had made a fatal mistake, and humanity was rewriting the very fabric of interstellar existence. The aftermath was not a celebration, but a profound transformation. Dr. Maya Rodriguez stood before the newly formed Interstellar Collaborative Council, her presentation less a victory speech and more a blueprint for a fundamentally new approach to galactic civilization. The chamber, filled with representatives from species both ancient and newly liberated, listened with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "We're not here to replace the old system," she explained, her voice carried by quantum translation systems that captured not just words, but nuanced intent. "We're here to create something that has never existed before." The transformation was total. Humanity had not just defeated the Galactic Council, they had exposed the fundamental flaws in millennia of interstellar governance. Every system, from economic networks to diplomatic protocols, was being reimagined. Colonel Marcus Reyes oversaw the practical implementation. Liberated species were being equipped not with dependency, but with the tools of true self-determination. Advanced education systems, adaptive technological frameworks, and comprehensive support networks replaced the old systems of control. Dr. Elena Kovac's quantum computing teams were developing infrastructure that was living, adaptive, and fundamentally democratic. Communication networks that allowed for unprecedented levels of collaboration, economic systems that prioritized collective growth over individual dominance. Chen Wei had transformed global economic strategies into a new model of interstellar cooperation. Resources were no longer hoarded, but distributed through intelligent systems that could predict and address needs before they became critical. Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura's biological research teams were working on something even more profound. They weren't just developing medical technologies, they were creating frameworks for understanding and respecting the fundamental diversity of sentient life. The liberated species found themselves in a situation unprecedented in galactic history. They were being offered not just freedom, but the tools to truly define their own existence. "We learned from our own history," Maya explained during a pivotal session. Colonization, oppression, the systematic destruction of cultures. We're choosing a different path. The new galactic infrastructure was built on principles that were radical in their simplicity: transparency, collaborative development, respect for individual and collective potential. Every system was designed with built-in mechanisms for evolution, for challenging existing structures. Technological development was no longer a competition, but a collaborative effort. Species that had been isolated for millennia began sharing knowledge, developing technologies that none could have created alone. Colonel Reyes understood the true nature of their achievement. This wasn't just a military victory. It was a fundamental reimagining of what civilization could be. "We didn't just fight a war," he told Maya during a quiet moment. "We demonstrated a different way of existing." The first generation of children born into this new galactic order would know nothing of the old systems of control. They would grow up in a universe where potential was not restricted, where collaboration was the highest form of achievement. As the first solar cycles of the new era began, it became clear that the Galactic Council's attempt to contain humanity had done something remarkable. They had unleashed a force of transformation that would reshape galactic civilization for millennia to come. The fatal mistake was complete, and humanity was just beginning.